primary schools, in our secondary schools. So Chilembwe is generally confined to the armed struggle of the moment of the 1915. But, scholars like Rodberg, have a slightly different point when they're now discussing about the significance of this of Chilembwe's rebellion, Chilembwe's revolt. Rodberg, for example, argues that the revolt was crushed within the shortest time possible. He argues, and I quote, brief, bloody, and wholly unsuccessful in its immediate context. The rising of Chilembwe, the rising of 1915, was the most dramatic of the early indigenous attempt to oppose colonial rule and must be understood as more than an isolated manifestation of discontent. Moreover, it strikingly colored the reactions of Central Africa's white ruling class toward aspirations. So Rothberg, his argument is that although this revolt was crushed immediately, but it is an important aspect of early indigenous attempt to oppose colonial rule and must be understood within the broader context of how Africans responded to colonial rule in Central Africa. Decades later, John McCracken, another Malawianist historian, demonstrated the extent to which, from the 1920s, Chilembwe's martyrdom inspired other African activists, such as Clement Kadali, who ended up founding one of the most powerful trade unions in South Africa. So we see from these two scholars, they are trying to broaden the scope and significance of Chilembwe. But the voices are not much. Even themselves too, they are trying to be clouded. The analysis are allocating Chilembwe within his martyrdom that he expressed during the revolt. So most of these analyses have confined Chilembwe to the nationalist struggle for colonial reforms of the moment. This paper, this presentation is trying to expand on this growing body, this scholarly historical scholarship, by arguing that Chilembwe's thinking and actions at that time were inspired by the broader social development concerns of Nyasaland, rather than the exegesis of the armed struggle of the moment itself. So we should look at Chilembwe from a social development perspective. And this is the perspective that is missing out in most of these analyses that are looking at the case of Chilembwe. Now, drawing from rituals, traditions, and the practices that the modern Malawi uses to commemorate, to remember Chilembwe, in this paper, we demonstrate how modern Malawi falls short of preserving the immortality of Chilembwe's legacy. So that's the point that we're making. We would like to unpack Chilembwe beyond the boundaries of the uprising itself. That Chilembwe's vision was concerned more with social development of the nation in the long term, rather than the immediate causes and concerns, and indeed the manner in which his revolt was dealt with. So the point that we're making is that although Chilembwe did not succeed as planned, his worldview was far much broader, tackling social development concerns of the moment, but also of the Malawi that we have today. There are close links that we are going to establish, we are going to explore between Chilembwe's social development initiatives and vision and social development thinking of the moment. Now let's look at Chilembwe's social development vision and initiatives, which in most of the discourses are missing out because they are so obsessed with the armed struggle itself and the extent to which it failed. So let's look at the Chilembwe's social development vision and initiatives. Now, one of the notable development initiatives within Chilembwe's evangelization work was promotion of formal education among African communities. This was one of the cardinal aspects of Chilembwe's social development initiatives. He wanted to promote formal education. He did not just want, but he did establish schools. So born in 1871, Chilembwe was of Yao ethnic descent from Chiladzulu. In 1897, he befriended a Baptist missionary, Joseph Booth, whom he accompanied to America in 1897. Now, with support from Dr. Lewis Jordan, who was the secretary of the Afro-American National Baptist Convention, Chilembwe pursued theological studies at Virginia Theological Seminary at Lynchburg. In 1900, Chilembwe came back to Nyasaland as an ordained minister and established the Providence Industrial Mission at PIA at Mbombwe in Chiladzulu. So his comeback in 1900 was associated with the subsequent establishment of a church, the PIM, that we know today. Now, by 1912, 12 years later, Chilembwe had recruited 7 assistants to help him preaching to over 800 church members. So by 1912, his church had grown up to 800 members. Now, beside growing of his church, there were also more than 900 students which were enrolled in schools that were set up by the PIM. And according to McCracken, Chilembwe had also embarked on building a large brick church, which was only going to be compared to the Blantyre Mission Church in Blantyre. It should be at HHI. So by 1912, Chilembwe was running about 2 major projects here. He had established a church which was growing with 800 church members, and his schools, which he established in Chiladzulu and within the vicinity of Chiladzulu, had over 900 learners. And he was building another church. And according to McCracken, this church was as big as the one by Blantyre Mission in Blantyre. Now, the aim of Chilembwe was to improve and modernize the socio-economic position of Africans to the level of Europeans. So that was the goal of Chilembwe when he was introducing schools, when he was building up his church. Now, there are 3 important implications of these initiatives, social development initiatives. One, Chilembwe's work in promoting education challenges the old school of thought that has always associated the introduction of formal education in Nyasaland with the civilizing initiatives, civilizing activities of Western missionary groups. So the introduction of formal education in Malawi should not only be associated with the Livingstonian missionaries, the Blantyre missionaries. No, there is another African source, African agency here. We see Chilembwe being actively involved in the introduction and development of formal schooling. The work of Chilembwe also underscores the role of the church and the civil society in complementing government efforts in the provision of social services within the framework of church-state relations, a dominant phenomenon in discourses of development in contemporary Malawi since the onset of multiparty democracy. So what Chilembwe did by introducing schools, by promoting education, should be appreciated within the framework of church-state relations, which remains an important role when we are discussing about the role of the church in the development of Malawi. Not only that, Chilembwe's abiding commitment to education aligns with Malawi's Agenda 2063, insofar as Chilembwe did not only look at education as a tool with which to challenge colonialism, but also as a catalyst for human capital development. Agenda 2063, one of the enablers of Agenda 2063 is promotion of human capital, which is going to drive the economy, to have an economy which is driven by knowledge and skills. And we see Chilembwe right away in 1910, between 1900 and 1912, actively building schools, enrolling students, teaching them, because he believed that education was an important factor in quality human capital development. Beyond education, Chirembwe's attitude towards gender equality is worth looking at it. So Chirembwe's attitude towards women and men make him a profound gender revolutionary of early 20th century Malawi. This is one of the most, I think, one of the aspects which is not often talked about Chirembwe. Chirembwe's views on gender equality. McCracken observes that, and I quote, concerned as he wrote in 1912 that the ordinary African woman in her heathen state is ignorant, uninteresting, and unlovable, he encouraged his wife Ida to teach girls sewing and deportment, and lectured teachers, pastors, and businessmen on the need to clothe their wives in elaborate European dresses. End of quote. So Chirembwe, wanted people, teachers, pastors, business, he wanted community people to be dressed just as Europeans dressed. He wanted them to be at par, to look at par like Europeans. He wanted women to be as attractive, as lovable as European women could be at the moment. He was concerned with the gender disparities. The state of an African woman at the moment was not at par with the state of a European woman. Chirembwe wanted to bury these inequalities. Regarding men, Chirembwe discouraged men from addictions to drug and substance abuse. This is a very important theme, and it's a very famous theme in today's world, drug and substance abuse. And it has never been linked to Chirembwe. Chirembwe discouraged men from addictions to drug and substance. Instead, he desired to see his countrymen work hard and prosper in their personal and community development endeavors, and to see them smart like Negro fellows he had seen in America and other countries. So Chirembwe wanted African men to work hard and to be like those Africans that he had seen in America, those who were also excelling in different aspects of life. So we see at this point, in early 20th century Malawi, as early as 1912, we see Chirembwe having a world view of an African man, that an African man needed to be at par with other men. And that was way before 1915. 1912 was way before 1915, 3 years before. We see him desiring for an African man who was working hard, who was productive, who was detached from drug and substance abuse. Now, for historical scholarship, this point of gender equality or gender empowerment is very important. For historical scholarship, Chirembwe's vision not only positioned him as a pioneer of gender equality campaign, but most profoundly, his vision must be perceived as a template that inspired social historians who became interested in gender history rather belatedly in the late 1970s and early 1980s. So social history, discipline of study, it grew in scope from the 1980s, in which I think social historians began to be interested in issues of gender, labor migration, etc., etc. But Chirembwe was interested in the empowerment of men and women right at the turn of the 20th century. He wanted an empowered woman. He wanted an empowered man, a productive woman, a productive man. So he advises his wife to teach women sewing. Sewing is kusoka, etc. Deportment means good manners, etc. And he lectured to different manners of people so that they could treat their wives with respect. They could clothe them like European women. And for men, he wanted them to be, hard workers, people who were not addicted to drugs, because these were leading to unproductive life. Now, at domestic level, the major implication, the major take-home lesson that we must draw from this point, from Chirembwe's views about women and men, is that the contemporary gender campaigns should not be looked at as outcomes of the transitions that happened in Malawi from the 1990s alone. No, that would be a grave mistake to associate the gender campaign with democratization processes, which happened in Malawi from 1990s. That would be erratic if we are to consider our history in totality and in honesty. Because we see Chirembwe from the early 1900s championing the empowerment of men and women. So the constitutional changes which happened in 1990s, bringing to fore issues of women empowerment, issues of gender equality, these constitutional reforms happened amidst within the long-term framework of this humble soul, Chirembwe, who had championed the empowerment of women and men. So the reforms that we see today, the gender campaign that we see today, should not be looked in the presentist lens or perspective alone. No, but rather they should be looked at as one of the important chapters that are happening in the long continuum struggle for freedom for the country, for freedom for men and women. At one point, at which point Chirembwe was a major champion of this gender and women empowerment rights. Apart from education and gender equality, we also know that Chirembwe practiced agriculture. He promoted agriculture so that people could grow crops and support their households. But for purposes of this paper, I want us to highlight on two social development themes that are often missing out in the narratives when we are discussing Chirembwe and the revolt. These are often missing out in most of the narratives. Issues of gender equality, issues of promotion of education, and how these are aligned to the present. The argument that we are making is that issues of education, issues of women empowerment are not outcomes of the contemporary constitutional reforms which happened in the 1990s. No, in the long-term perspective, Chirembwe pioneered these ideas. Now, given this importance of Chirembwe, including that of rebellion and the concerns that he fought for, Chirembwe maintains a very important position in our history. But the point is, although Chirembwe retains a heroic recognition in the political history of Malawi, his remembrance, however, is marked by contradictions and dilemmas, highlighting the controversial nature of social memory. So although Chirembwe is an important figure in our history, his memory in modern Malawi continues to suffer from a myriad of contradictions and dilemmas. Now, for instance, Chirembwe's Day was only declared a public holiday by former President Bagiri Muhoozi in 1995, as I said in the introduction, after 31 years of safe rule since 1964. This is very interesting to note. So after 31 years of independence, Chirembwe's Day became into it was declared a public holiday 31 years later in 1995. It is interesting to note that during Kamuzu reign, a close celebrated holiday was the Martyrs' Day, which aimed to pay respect to all Malawians who sacrificed their lives for the freedom of the country. But there was no designation of special day for Chirembwe during Kamuzu era. We are going to look at the reason very shortly. Why was that the case? Now, instead, the other more sacred public holiday that was celebrated with unbridled flavor of martyrdom was the Kamuzu Day. So Kamuzu Day was celebrated and venerated quite a lot during Kamuzu. And given the fact that Kamuzu was venerated as the father and founder of Malawi's nation, so I argue, honoring the memory of John Chirembwe alongside Kamuzu during the one-party regime would have overshadowed, if not completely rivaled, the political prestige of Kamuzu's life presence. So the point that we're talking about here, in relation to the memory of Chirembwe and why his memory is continued despite Chirembwe being an important figure. The first point is that the declaration of Chirembwe, the recognition of Chirembwe's public holiday was delayed because Kamuzubanda did not want to overshadow his life presence by another figure apart from himself. It is important to note that following the transition to multiparty democracy in 1995, former President Muhoozi designated 14th May as Kamuzu Day, public holiday, and replaced it with 14th June as Freedom Day. So Muhoozi replaced Kamuzu Day and replaced it with Freedom Day, the day during which we honored the referendum of 1993. So we see Muhoozi, I think, declaring Chilembwe Day in 1995, and he eliminated Kamuzu Day and instead replaced it with Freedom Day. However, in 2009, former President Bingu Mutharika reinstated not only the Kamuzu Day as a public holiday, but he also renamed several public landmark structures, such as Chichiri Stadium in Blantyre, the News House, and the Lilongwe Airport, after the name of the first president of Malawi, from whom he also inherited the title of Mwazi. Now, what we see here is that after the transition to multi-party democracy, we see Muhoozi introducing Chilembwe Day to remember his martyrdom, and then he decommissions Kamuzu Day as a holiday. But reinstates the Kamuzu Day and maintains Chilembwe Day. Our argument here, therefore, is that the memory of historical erasure prominent personalities from the annals of Malawi, and indeed the annals of any other country, is one of the prevailing power politics of the time. What is the point? Why didn't we have Chilembwe Day during the Kamuzubanda era? It was because of the power politics of the moment. Our argument is that Kamuzu did not want to overshadow his life presence with the memory of Chilembwe, despite the fact that Chilembwe was an important figure. But the memorialization of Chilembwe continued to take place in designating the 15th of January as a public holiday. In 2001 and 2016, respectively,
sorry, Mr. Douglas Nyirenda. Sorry for interruption, Mr. Douglas Nyirenda. I think your network is up and down where you are. Maybe try to cut the video so that you just speak with the audio. Maybe it's going to improve. And yeah, if you can also be summarizing in the next 10 minutes. Over to you. Okay, Mr. Douglas Nyirenda, we can't hear you. You have muted your audio. I was suggesting that you just mute your video only so that maybe the network could improve. So unmute your audio and speak to us since you don't have the slides, but the video, you can mute it so that we don't see your video. Hopefully the network is going to improve. Back to you, Mr. Douglas Nyirenda. Are you failing to unmute yourself on the audio? Mr. Douglas Nyirenda, we can't hear you if you are talking. Your video and your audio, both of them are off. If you are struggling, just unmute everything, but then your video was kind of, interrupting with the network, or rather the flow. But
can you hear me?
We can hear you, yeah, but it's fine now. The video is off, but your audio is on, so you can proceed. You were talking about 2001, something like that. In 10 minutes, if you can also be summarizing. Yeah, over to you.
Yes, 10 minutes is even a lot. So in 2001 and 2016 respectively, the Reserve Bank of Malawi introduced the face of John Chirembe on the national currency of 500 kwacha and 2,000 kwacha. Now, the appearance of the face of Chirembe on the national currency excited the nation to the extent that any type of money or any amount of money a person had was referred to as Chirembe. You see, so over time, Chirembe began to be a symbol of progress, of wealth accumulation, and improved standards of living. This was in line. This is not just coincidence. It is in line with the social development philosophy which Chirembe had in mind to improve the lives of Africans at the moment. However, given the escalating levels of dehumanizing poverty, high youth unemployment, food insecurity, climate change vulnerabilities, rampant corruption and abuse of public resources, overdebtedness, and high donor dependency, it remains unclear whether modern Malawi is dignifying the memory and aspirations of John Chirembe. If we look at all these vices, one wonders whether the modern Malawi is properly dignifying the memory of Chirembe, given his vision and what is obtaining on the ground. The renaming of Palombe district in 2024 after John Chirembe is another important aspect of trying to preserve the memory of Chirembe. Although Chirembe is a national figure as we see him today, one wonders why such declaration was effected on Chirembe's death, given the historical connections. Why the declaration was not effected on Chirembe's hospital, given the historical connections Chirembe had or shared with the district. Instead, the former president Chakwera declared the Palombe Hospital. This question is important to reflect on, given the growing resistance that we are seeing against the naming of Palombe after Chirembe. For example, in 2016, this month, early January, the Loma chiefs, led by Paramount Chief Kaduya, petitioned the government of Malawi to consider reverting to the old name Palombe District Hospital. Now, the question is not whether that petition is merited or not. That question falls outside the scope of this discussion. Rather, what should concern researchers of public memory and indeed those who care about the history of these local figures like Chirembe should be potential contestations and intersectionalities between notions of memory, history, and identity politics. This is very important. Chirembe is an important historical figure, but remembering him is problematic because there's resistance when I think we see that naming of landmark features is challenged by figures. Recently, President Mutharika has named a street in Lombe after Chirembe. We are yet to see how leaders are going to react to that, but we've already seen a reaction against the naming of an important figure like Chirembe. This contestation is an important aspect to consider when remembering Chirembe. Now, in conclusion, this paper has argued that though Chirembe retains a lofty position in historical accounts of Malawi, his memorialization remains a highly contested aspect. We have demonstrated also the way in which the modern state is failing to use the social development vision of Chirembe to guide its development programming, despite Chirembe's notable efforts in the areas of education, gender, and indeed agriculture. Instead, our analysis tend to remember him in the context of the rebellion, in the context of the fight, the physical fight which he fought. We divorce him from the philosophical fight which Chirembe was concerned with at that time in the long-term view of the Malawi nation. So this paper concludes and argues that the contestations that we have observed offer valuable research opportunities for scholars of memory studies and indeed other institutes like Lost History Foundation to reconsider and reconstruct the memory and legacies of Chirembe within the long-term development agenda of Made in Malawi, beyond historical narratives to which Chirembe's revolt is confined to. That's the overall, the take-home point that we must reflect on as we be retiring from this presentation. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mr. Douglas Nyirenda, for setting the ball rolling and for the insightful presentation that you have just shared with us, which in a way, it responds to two critical questions that we have been receiving throughout the discourse on Chilembwe. The first one being that he rushed, he staged the rebellion too early, or his works were rather implemented much more too early, such that others blame him for the lack of infrastructure development in Malawi currently, with the argument that if he had delayed his works and his rebellion in particular, probably the Europeans would have stayed longer in Nyasaland, and Nyasaland would have become independent probably in 1994, like South Africa. In the process, we would have had tremendous infrastructure development if Chilembwe had not staged the rebellion much earlier as he did. And there's that phrase from our brothers and sisters, some of them, that Chilembwe anapupuluma. So your presentation responds to that narrative that looks at Chilembwe within the confines of the rebellion, within the 3 days of the rebellion in January 1915. And secondly, you are also responding to the concern that some scholars like Edward Zombe, who argues that we overemphasize the importance of John Chilembwe at the expense of other struggle icons like Elliot Kamwana. So when we are engaging in such kind of debates or discussions as we are doing tonight, some scholars raise concerns to say, why do we keep on discussing Chilembwe, who is now overshadowing other struggle icons? And they argue that it's high time we probably shave aside Chilembwe and begin to talk about other struggle icons who have also played a critical role in the struggle for independence in Nyasaland. So that's how I can summarize your presentation. And probably in your final remarks, after we get the inputs from the floor, you can also touch on these aspects. John Chilembwe anapupuluma, or rather John Chilembwe, when you are arguing to say his contribution is underappreciated and also underrepresented, if we engage in that to unpack Chilembwe so that he becomes appreciated the way he's supposed to, are we not then getting into that ditch or a trap where others are criticizing to say, we have talked about Chilembwe too much, such that we have to shave him aside and talk about others? So probably in your parting shots, as we go towards the end of the session, I would want you to respond, or rather amplify these two aspects. So ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, I would like to call Kamuhara Serenje, the Executive Director of Lost History Foundation, to come and share with us Chilembwe beyond the rebellion of January 1915, to complement on what Mr. Douglas Nyirenda, the lecturer of history at Nzuni University, has just shared with us. But before I give the floor to Kamuhara Serenje, I would like us to have a short break, probably 5 minutes, to allow him to organize himself, his slides and all that, because I understand he has got slides to share. Then he chips in to run his presentation. So meanwhile, we get into a short break. But as we go into a short break, I would want to share an audio that we can listen to as others are getting a cup of, a glass of water to take, and also as Kamukwala Serenje is getting organized to share his presentation. So 5 minutes that we need to go for a short break, and here's the audio that we should listen to.
Kupesa kuti hedu mukuyenda mangika musama suka iko wena mubira mubira yawo mola munende tua kupina tesi kukosete kina konya vete mudo kutetua na pena tiene la kutete kokose kwa chon chilembe ya moyo wache kande kande lelo tele koyenda tele nyangwa tele kifungo cha kiyema bene adaya bili la utipenyela tutendele tiwo polo mudele kupempa kwa hampo ye kutenze kuwaka use mubendele aida Umbakalola haida, mina uteka, sauna naso haida. Hadi pando patengamana, tawa kasipanga.
John, asbabu kwa John, inenisalamia John.
Da haida, umbakalola haida, mina uteka, sauna naso haida. Hadi pando patengamana, tawa kasipanga.
John, mamuda wanga, asbabu kwa John, inenisalamia John.
Haida. Mina kuteka tizaona nazo haida pakali pando patengamana tawanga ho haida nyumba kalola haida mina kuteka tizaona nazo haida pakali pando patengamana tawanga spaka
John mamuna wanga azungabu kwa John inenisalamia John
haida nyumba kalola haida mina kuteka tizaona naso haida pakali pando patengamana tawanga spanga
John mamuna wanga azungabu kwa John inenisalamia John
haida nyumba kalola haida mina kuteka tizaona naso haida pakali pando patengamana tawanga spanga
John mamuna wanga azungabu kwa John inenisalamia John
kanisani inuyo pamene muli nupo muli mula mulendo wa samunda kupeza kuti hinu mukuyenda momangika mosamasuka ndipo wena mukukwira mubinda yawo mola mulindikwa kukwira maulesi kungozindikira nkhonya vili mutu kutidwa mukanafila mbwa tiyenela kuti titokose kwa John Chilembwe yemwe wadata ya moyo wache kale lelo tilikoyenda tili nyangwa tilipe chifukwa cha iye mene adaya mbili la kutimenyela ditundendele ndiwufulu maulele tikupempha kwa hampo yekotenzeku wake use mundendere kalola haida mina
kupha John ine ndisala ndiya John
haida mulungu akalola haida mwina nkuteka tizaona naso haida pakali pano patengamana tawa mkazi wanga
John mwamuna wanga azunga kupha John ine ndisala ndiya John
haida mulungu akalola haida mwina nkuteka tizaona naso haida pakali pano patengamana tawa mkazi wanga
John mwamuna wanga azunga kupha John ine ndisala ndiya John
yapa makamaka tiyenela kumvesa chilembwe hadalolela kukhesa mwazi chifukwa cha ifetosa Malawi hamuna ndiyakazi why black raiders of Africa shut them down tribute to the black raider chilembwe me I go rise a peace finished there's nothing you can stop me fi sing this song like a children smile like a children jump Konda de wina ndinsake mabare Ona ni chilembwe iya dade muntu wa mpampo Komano sofano eno Ntawi yoti songe bueno Ho follow Haida Numba kalola haida pano patengamana tawa mkazi wanga
John mwamuna wanga azunga kupha John ine ndisala ndiya John
haida mulungu akalola haida mwina nkuteka tizaona naso haida pakali pano patengamana tawa mkazi wanga.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our session. I think we can continue from where we stopped. I would like them to call upon Conleth before Conleth comes in. As we wait for the audio to finish, I wanted to add an aspect to Mr. Douglas Nyirenda on the list of points that you should touch on when you are giving your parting shots. It would be the aspect of failure. From different platforms, there is also a narrative that comes which argues that Chilembwe was also like a failure in the sense that he didn't achieve what he intended to, what he was advancing. He did not achieve at the end of the day. They look at probably the rebellion, that the takeover of government, which is perceived to be his intention from that narrative, to say staging an armed resistance, his intention was to take over government. But then that did not happen. The Africans did not take over government from the Europeans. Therefore, Chilembwe was a failure, right, on that basis. So we have had such kind of narrative being peddled in different forums or platforms. So probably at the end of the session, you may also need to touch on that. And this is also going to Conleth as well. As you give your parting shots, kindly also attend to these 3 points. Chilembwe being a failure on the aspect that we did not see the takeover of government by the Africans when they staged that rebellion, and also that he rushed. He staged his works or implemented his works too early, such that we should blame him for the poor infrastructure development in Malawi, because he started the struggle quite early. You can also address that, Selenje, and also the other aspect of Chilembwe overshadowing other struggle icons at the end. But for the time being, Kamkwala Selenje, I now give you the floor to give us your presentation in 30 minutes, and then we open the floor for inputs and comments, and thereafter we get into closing. So at this juncture, Conleth Kamkwala Selenje, the Executive Director of Lost History Foundation, over to you. Mr. Douglas Nyirenda, you can mute yourself, your video and your audio. And also remember, if you can prepare for us your notes, because sometimes people who are part of the session, they would also request for notes to go through your presentation. If you can arrange that, not now, but probably maybe later, like tomorrow or the other day, such that we can circulate to others as a write-up from this session. Many thanks. Over to you, to Conleth Selenje Kamkwala, Executive Director of Lost History Foundation. You have the floor. Over to
you. Thank you very much, Dr. Paliani Chinguo, my colleague at...
Before you proceed,
yes.
Sorry, Kamkwara, if you can click on that icon, which looks like a glass of wine, so that your slides can be much more bigger to cover our screens this side.
Like that.
If you click there, not yet, but maybe it's coming up. Yeah, I think it's coming up. If you have clicked, it's fine. What do you see on your end? Yes, yeah, you are there. So you are good to go. In 30 minutes, give us your presentation. Kamkwala Selenje, over to you.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Paliani Chinguo, who is my colleague at the Lost History Foundation. And thank you very much, the co-presenter, Mr. Douglas Nyirenda. Your presentation was really mind-opening. I was actually enjoying it myself. We proceed to talk and expand more on what the first presenter has given us. So we are to look at the moral and political challenge in Chilembwe, a man who challenged colonial injustice. So Chilembwe was among the first clergy in Nyasaland to issue open letters publicly condemning injustices perpetrated by the colonial administration. So how do we interpret this? That act positioned him as one of the earliest moral voices against structural violence, racial exploitation, and abuse of African labor, setting a precedence for faith-based political resistance. Now we see the use of collective approach to grievances. In his planning and his thinking, Chilembwe tried to bring in and involve a number of religious men from different churches, which were not part of the PIM, to be involved in the uprising, but they refused. His mind was, if I bring these people who are also Christians, although they belong to other churches, we shall speak with one voice. So, although an observation was that the religious men who refused were not in support of violence, the aim was to stand as one force and speak out. Who did he approach? He approached Hare Kambwiri Matecheta, an elder at Blantyre Mission. He approached Mr. Joseph Bismarck. He approached Mungo Mare Chisuse. He approached the Reverend Stephen Kundecha of Domase Mission. He also approached Pastor Morrison Kalinde Malinki of the Seventh-day Adventist of Malamulo in Cholo. So his mind was, if we come together and if we approach the colonial government as a collective body, our grievances will be addressed. Remember, all these others, some were notable men, businessmen, some were members of the clergy. So he felt, Chilembwe saw it necessary to approach them to have a collective voice, of course, minus the violence. So we look at this in the present day Malawi, adoption of the formation of a quasi-religious body in Malawi. Now, minus using violence to resolving issues, in 1992, Malawi formed the Public Affairs Committee, PAC, from a cross-section of religious bodies to look into issues affecting the welfare of Malawians in the country. So the same value of religious leaders coming together to partake in addressing issues affecting the lives of the people in our country was also realized by Chilembwe as early as in 1913 and 14. We look further. Chilembwe's involvement in economic empowerment as a form of resistance. Douglas has also said about this one, has expanded on this. Chilembwe promoted economic self-reliance and empowerment for both men and women. So this approach directly challenged the colonial system, which was built on African dispossession and dependency. The colonial government wanted an African to be dependent and to be ripped off all the rights, properties, and opportunities of economic empowerment. Now, the initiative adopted by Chilembwe reflected an understanding that political freedom was inseparable from economic agency. We look at him using education as a tool for liberation, which also the co-presenter, Mr. Douglas, shared. So Chilembwe prioritized education, as he said, by setting up and building schools and education centers. Okay, he recognized literacy as critical consciousness as the foundation for long-term emancipation. He realized that education under Chilembwe was not merely religious, but social and political, aimed at producing an informed political leadership among the natives of Nyasaland. As my colleague said, he opened up schools in many areas in Nyasaland. We look at his contributions to public health. Chilembwe's mission of the PIM offered health services, especially during the Daniel Malikebu leadership of PIM until today. And being industrial, the mission provided skills to the society and empowering them. Chilembwe is also seen as a pioneer in international education. He was the first known Nyasa to travel to the USA for education and among the earliest, if not the first Nyasa to obtain a university degree. Now, that exposure connected Nyasaland to the global Black intellectual community, to Pan-Africanists and colonial networks. Chilembwe, creating pathways for other Nyasas. You see, he didn't just monopolize that I went to the US, I should be back and I should be the only star. No. So his mission facilitated the dispatch of 3 Nyasas from Chirazulu to the USA for education. They were Matthews Kunjilima, of course, some books just write him as Matthews Njilima, and Frederick Kunjilima, and then not yet Dr. Daniel Malikebu. So 3, Matthews Kunjilima, Frederick Kunjilima, Daniel Malikebu. These young men were given the opportunity, an open way to go to the United States to get education as Chilembwe had done. he should also be honored as having contributed to producing Malawi's first medical doctor. Daniel Malikebu, one of the beneficiaries of the education initiatives, went on to become Malawi's first medical doctor. He was now later Dr. Daniel Sharp Malikebu. Now, that symbolizes Chilembwe's long-lasting contribution to African professional advancement and national development. In the picture, we see from right, number 1, 2, 3, just before the lady seated. That is Dr. Daniel Sharp Malikebu from Chiradzulo, who was educated on the initiative of John Chilembwe. This picture was taken in the Office of International Affairs Resources, North Carolina Central University. Here he is in his graduation gown, you can see there. So Chilembwe also championed transitional influence through labor activism. We look at Frederick Kunjirima, later relocated to Tanganyika, where he emerged as a renowned trade union leader. He served as secretary for the Tanganyika African Government Service Association. He played an active role in Tanganyika's independence struggle. And Chilembwe's legacy thus extends beyond Malawi into wider African liberation movements through the roles played by Frederick in Tanganyika. Again, we witness continuity from 1915 to organized nationalism. What happened? Okay, remnants of the 1915 uprising later became active in native associations of Nyasaland, which were critical precursors to formal political organization. Notably, there was Issa MacDonald Lawrence and Peter Mleremba, who became co-founders of the Nyasaland African Congress in 1944. Remember, it was the Nyasaland African Congress which later, in 1959, after the state of emergency, changed to the Malawi Congress Party and ushered the country into independence in 1964. So Issa MacDonald Lawrence became the first treasurer of the Nyasaland African Congress, and the Nyasaland African Congress was the first political party in Malawi. As I said, it was a vehicle to independence. Now, that underscores Chilembwe's role in shaping a political lineage rather than an isolated rebellion as other people view him. We look at how did Chilembwe influence Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey is one of the renowned Afro activists who fought for the rights of Negroes in America. So in 1896, Joseph Booth and John Chilembwe co-founded a political organization called the African Christian Union, which was actively involved in agitating the slogan, Africa for Africans in Nyasaland. It's a famous quote. It's a famous slogan. It's a famous philosophy, which Joseph Booth imparted in Chilembwe as early as before Chilembwe went to America for his theological studies. Now, later on, when Marcus Garvey established a movement called Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA, which fought for the rights of Africans in diaspora, he adopted the slogan, Africa for Africans. That was the same slogan which was used by Joseph Booth and John Chilembwe. We look at an enduring revolutionary symbolism in Chilembwe, and a present example was seen in the Mwanza War of 1967. According to documents accessed and in the custody of Lost History Foundation, during the Chisiza-led Ufulu Umozi Malawi fighters in the Mwanza War of 1967, the fighters invoked the spirit of John Chilembwe as an inspiration in their struggle against the authoritarian one-party state in the post-independence Malawi. So Chilembwe thus remained a living symbol of resistance across different historical periods. Here is a picture of the leader of the 1967 war on Dr. Banda's government. This is Yatuta Chisiza, founder of the Umozi Ufulu Malawi UMA group. And we see this. It's a newspaper cut from the Nyasaland Times. This is 52 years after the Chilembwe uprising. It's when Yatuta and his friends involved themselves in their uprising. Rebels are planning to assassinate president. So Chilembwe is invoked as an inspiration in these fighters. These fighters, who were labeled as rebels by the Banda government, wanted to liberate the country from the abusive reign of Kamuzu. But this happened 52 years after the 1915 uprising. My slides. Yeah, so I have talked of several areas where Chilembwe should be remembered and celebrated, and how relevant he is to present affairs of our nation, adding to what my co-presenter, Mr. Douglas Nyirenda, has shared with us. So, plus what Mr. Nyirenda shared, I would like now to say this is the end of my presentation, and I pass back the platform to the moderator, Dr. Aliani Chinguo, to continue moderating, probably to usher us into the section of further views, questions, comments, and the like. So thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. Many thanks, Conleth Serenje Kamkwala Serenje, for the brilliant presentation that you have just shared with us. And we appreciate as well, just as we appreciate the first presentation. The presentations, one and the same in a way, speaking to the same theme, Chilembwe beyond the rebellion of January 1915. So we have just added a dimension. I would like now to open the floor for inputs and questions and comments. But before I do that, I would like to just add some snippets on the aspect of the international, positionality of John Chilembwe. You have talked about Marcus Garvey, a very important point to demonstrate that Chilembwe is much, much, much more beyond the rebellion that happened in 3 or 4 days, 5 days in January 1915. Because you have talked about Issa MacDonald Lawrence. Suffice to say that apart from Issa MacDonald Lawrence being one of the founding members of the first political party in Nyasaland, in Malawi, in 1944, and becoming the first treasurer general of the first political party, that today others call, or others know it as the Malawi Congress Party, because in 1959, the party transformed itself to the Malawi Congress Party that we have today. So Issa McDonald Lawrence, who is a remnant of the uprising, or a member of the PIM at the time of the uprising, becomes the first Treasurer General, and also delivers the keynote address at the inaugural conference of the first political party in 1944. But there's also another dimension of Issa McDonald Lawrence, in that he was an agent of UNIA, or rather, he was an agent of the Negro World. The Negro World was a magazine produced by Marcus Garvey's organization called UNIA, which you have talked to. And in Nyasaland, the distributor of this magazine or publication was Issa McDonald Lawrence. And the publication was banned by the Nyasaland government. And he also was arrested for possessing, or for being found in possession of, copies of the Negro World, which was a magazine by Marcus Garvey's organization called UNIA. So he was an agent of the Negro World, not only in Nyasaland, but also in Northern Rhodesia. So he was a follower, or rather, a key player in Marcus Garvey's movement from Nyasaland. And this is a man who is a product of John Chilembwe's PIM, and a remnant of the uprising of January 1915, if you want to put it that way. Not only that, you talked about, yes, Africa for the Africans, which was a slogan that the UNIA, at its convention held in August 1920 in New York, adopted, right? Africa for the Africans, and then they added those at home and those abroad, which was the principal theme to African self-determination and empowerment, right? And as you rightly put it, John Chilembwe and Joseph Booth and two others had already begun to use that phrase as far back as 1897, while in Nyasaland, when they founded that organization called the African Christian Union. So there's also another point that I wanted to add on what you said, Selenge, that Chilembwe writes a letter to the Times in 1914, which others argue to say that's the first pastoral letter. Whether that is right or wrong, I don't know, but we have read some write-ups to say the first pastoral letter in Nyasaland was the one that was written by Chilembwe. But that's a debate for another day. But I want to talk about this letter which was published in the Times newspaper. Chilembwe in 1914, in his letter, hinting at how Africans in Nyasaland were being denied equal recognition and opportunities under the colonial rule, and then expected to sacrifice their lives in a war that did not concern them, right? In 1920, at the UNIA convention held in August in New York, they adopted what is called the Declaration of the Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World, right? And this declaration, right, highlighted systemic discrimination against Black people in employment, wages, and political representation, particularly in the British West Indies and other colonies. And this is now 6 years later, after we had talked about the same issues in Nyasaland, and you have UNIA, Marcus Garvey and his movement issuing a declaration echoing the same sentiments, right? And in the same letter of 1914, Chilembwe, right, strongly opposes the forced recruitment of Africans to fight in wars that serve the interest of the Europeans, right? You find the same sentiment being raised as well in the Declaration of the Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World by UNIA, adopted in August 1915, which the declaration strongly opposes the forced recruitment of Africans to fight in the World War I And this is 6 years later, right? The sentiments of Chilembwe being echoed at the global level. And finally, before we open the floor to discussions, there is another global resonance of Chilembwe in Nyasaland and the connections to Marcus Garvey and his organization UNIA, right? There's a book by Hill, 1995, which publishes all the papers that were issued by Marcus Garvey and UNIA. It's a publication of such papers. And on page 428, there's a quotation which I want to read, which speaks to the Chilembwe uprising and how it inspired Marcus Garvey members in New York, right? And I quote, page 428 of this book. It says, and I quote, "News of the revolt against the British colonial rule in Nyasaland and the subsequent inquiry into its causes circulated widely in the British Empire and elsewhere. Meanwhile, Marcus Garvey organizers on the streets of the New York were said to have invoked the name John Chilembwe in their own cause for African freedom." End of quote. So that's where you find another connection between John Chilembwe, his work at the global level, as far as Marcus Garvey's movement is concerned, to say his organizers on the streets of New York were invoking his name in their cause for African freedom. I end there. I now open the floor for inputs, questions, and comments. You can raise your hand, and then I'll be able to invite you to chip in. I
Before
now
you
open
open
the
the
floor
questions,
for comments.
Doctor.
Hands. Okay,
Before
okay,
you
over to
open
you,
the questions,
Conleth, yes.
I would like
okay.
to address that issue of Anapupuluma. Chilembwe was
Okay, no, that one, hold it on. That
right,
one you
all
can
right.
address it after the comments and the questions. So it's
All right.
it's your homework. I'll give you the floor to address it. But now let's give the floor to the participants to chip in on what you have said and what also Mr. Douglas Nyirenda has shared with us.
Thank you.
Who wants to come first on the floor? Hands. By show of hands, I don't see hands. You can indicate wherever you are if you want to say something. So meanwhile, as we wait for the hands, maybe I should give you the floor, Kamkwara, to address that point as people are getting organized to raise their points and inputs. Back to you, Conleth, and then I'll be watching over the hands on the floor. Kamkwara.
Thank you very much. There are indeed some views which are, I can call them misleading, and I can also call them, sorry to say so, but they originate from lack of understanding of our history. They conclude that the Reverend John Chilembwe rushed in acting on the whites. People say he acted and chased them away. Anapupuluma utamangisa azungu. So I should quote, chasing them. Utamangisa. The uprising did not end up in the colonizers leaving Nyasaland. It rather strengthened their grip on their administration, because now it opened their eyes that these Africans, these natives, don't want our rule. Nyasaland was declared a protectorate in 1891 officially. So governors were holding the highest office of the land. And from 1891 to 1915, you can count, it's not so many years, is when Chilembwe stood up to oppose it. He arrived in Malawi, in Nyasaland rather, in 1900. So after 15 years, he rose up to fight. But the colonizers did not leave the land until 1964 plus. So calculating 1891 to 1964, it's around 73 years. And if we count our independence from 1964 to date, we have not reached yet 73 years, but we have done remarkable progress in many areas of our country. Not just structural, others are constitutional, others are affecting the minds of the people. Many, many developments have taken place. So we have done what the whites did not do in 73 years. For these 73 years, the white man was benefiting from Nyasaland. They knew what they were getting. They knew what they were benefiting from. From 1891 to somewhere around 1964 to 66, there were about 13 governors who had served in the office of the governor, representing the Queen of England. So this mind originates from lack of understanding of history, because Chilembwe did not chase the whites. No, they continued being here up to 1964, and from 64 they still continued being with us up to 1966, when we were declared a republic to have our own president. So I wanted to correct that mind, that misconception. Maybe my co-presenter Douglas can add something on that. Douglas, before I leave the point, maybe you can add something on what I've said, on what Chilembwe was quick in his actions. Anapupuluma akuti kuthamangisa azungu akutero. What do you say, if you can hear me?
Okay, before he comes in, I want to check whether amongst the participants there's anyone else who would want to chip in, to add or subtract. Yes, Drew, do you want to say something? Over to you, if you want to say something. You have the floor, Drew.
Okay, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Go ahead, Drew.
All right. Thank you, Kamkwala. I think it's an enlightening presentation. I've liked how you have connected the acts of Chilembwe with the present political activism. However, in your presentation, you have also connected the actions of John Chilembwe with one Yatuta Chisiza. So I have a question on that. The question is, to what extent is it historically and politically appropriate to draw parallels between John Chilembwe's 1915 uprising against colonial rule and Yatuta Chisiza's 1967 rebellion against Kamuzubanda's regime, given the differences in context, objectives, and legacies of these two struggles? Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Kamkwara, take note of that question. I don't know if there's anyone else who wants to chip in, to add or subtract, disagree, agree, give us another perspective. The floor is open for perspectives that one would want to share. You can chip in to agree, you can chip in to disagree, or to raise a question, and so on and so forth. Who else wants to chip in on the floor before Kamkwara addresses the question? I don't see any hand from the floor at this juncture. Therefore, I call upon Conlith to respond to the question on the point you raised, that Yatuta Chisiza and friends in one of the documents which they are expressing themselves, why they decided to come to Malawi and stage a rebellion against Dr. Kamuzibanda or against the one-party state in Malawi. They are producing quite a number of documents to justify their position. And in the preamble of one of the documents, in which they are outlining their objectives and why they decided to gang up together and come and overthrow the government in Malawi in 1967. They are invoking the spirit of John Chilembwe in much the same way as we heard from that quotation that organizers of Marcus Garvey in New York in the streets were invoking the name John Chilembwe. Similarly, we find these Malawians in 1967 starting their write-up to express themselves and justify their intervention in Malawi, drawing inspiration from John Chilembwe in 1915, which Conleth alluded to. So the question is it fair to draw that, comparison or parallel between 1915 and 1967, different contexts and what have you? Kamkwara Selenje, over to you. And once again, we are open for participants, or rather for inputs from participants to disagree, agree, add, subtract. But meanwhile, Kamkwara Selenje, you have the floor to respond to Drew. Over to you.
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Drew. Okay, fine. In the first place, you should understand that. Oh, there is some voice in the background.
Yeah, there's a voice in the background. The rest of us, let's mute our audios and videos if possible, so that we have one speaker at a time. Back to you, Kamkwara, over to you.
Yeah, so we should understand that fighting or uprising comes about when diplomacy has failed. So we see diplomacy failing in the connections or consultations, discussions between Chilembwe and the colonial government. Evidence is there. And one major evidence is the condemnation of the Nyasas being involved in a war which did not concern them. Instead of taking that word of reason constructively, the colonial government reacted by withdrawing that paper from circulation. Luckily, one guy kept it. And later, because of that publication and Chilembwe's persistent approaches towards the government for the rights of the people, the government is planning to deport him to Seychelles. And Chilembwe gets news of that. We know from historical records that the uprising was not meant for 22nd January. It was meant for a later date. It could be very much organized than what we got. And the evidence of that is his sending of a letter to German East Africa. It was something which he was planning, but he quickly executed it because he got the news that, watch out, you'll be arrested and deported. So, word of reason fails. What next? People express themselves in a manner which seems appropriate. Even presently, we're seeing this in many countries. So, the same, fast forward to 1967. If you follow closely the background of the uprising, the war by Chisiza and his comrades, has its roots in the cabinet crisis, at which word of reason, consultation, logic, discussions for the common good of Malawi failed. Word of reason landed on deaf ears. Instead of taking reason, Kamuzu, the prime minister, opted to label these Malawians as rebels who wanted to overthrow his government. Yet it wasn't like that. They even refused when Banda said, I will resign. They said, no, 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 no. The aim is not you, Mr. Prime Minister, to resign. The aim is you should fix the policies which you have adopted towards the people of Nyasaland. Introduction of the ticket, favoritism, relations with, I think that was Taiwan, if I remember very well. The Skinner report. So if these issues were addressed, I don't think the cabinet crisis could have taken place. And if it didn't take place, there could be no happening as the Manza War, because it is a product of the cabinet crisis. So you see the situation during the Chilemba uprising, what caused it, and the situation of 1967. And another thing was these people saw Chilembwe as a brave man. War is about bravery. You can't carry a gun if you're someone who is timid. War is about killing. You either kill or get killed. That's war. So you need someone who you hold, who you revere in your mind to be an aspiration to what you're doing. And they found this in the spirit of my dear Reverend John Chilembwe. I don't know whether I've answered your question, my brother Drew.
Drew, are you there? Are you satisfied or not? Okay, he seems not to be there, but we are still in the segment where we are getting reactions, inputs, questions from the floor. I see none, no hands yet. In that case, we might be moving towards closing if there is no anyone else to chip in to take the floor. So moving towards closing, I will do, okay, Drew, is that Drew again? Okay, you have the floor, Drew, and Wongani. I see you in that order. Drew, come first, and then Wongani, before we move towards closing. Over to you, Drew. Drew, we can't hear you, so we move to Wongani first, and then there's also Godfrey. Drew, you come at the end since we can't hear you. I gave you the floor, but we can move on in the interest of time. Wongani, Godfrey, and then Drew once more.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think I can see from the presentation we have had today and for the previous one that both John Chilembwe and Eliud Kamwana were all true Malawian reformers. So I have a question that during the John Chilembwe Day, I was seeing some pictures of some monuments of John Chilembwe in some European countries. I think it's London or the USA. So I just wanted to ask, are those monuments true? And are they real? And what is the history behind it? Is it related to the uprising which happened which is connected to Marcus Garvey? Or what is the history behind those monuments, if they are real? I also wanted to ask that looking at the uprising which John Chilembwe had, do you think that despite John Chilembwe being a courageous man and a brave man, do you think that during his present time, did he lack some like-minded individuals who would support him, more especially Malawians who would support his uprising? Yes, thank you.
All right, Kamkwara, take note of those two questions. We move to Godfrey. I saw a hand from Godfrey. Godfrey, are you there? Godfrey, if you are there, take the floor.
Yes, I am. I don't know if I can be heard properly.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to appreciate the organizers of this discussion and appreciate the whole discussion. Although I found Mr. Douglas Nyilenda's presentation along the way, but actually I have picked something very important. Now my contribution is just to make a comment on what Conrad Serenje said, which deals with connecting John Chilembwe's uprising legacies to the modern or what we can say current developments in politics, education, international issues, and all that stuff, and also to connect it with the issue of Johnny Chilembwe anapupuluma. Maka should dwell on Johnny Chilembwe anapupuluma. I think the problem with that narrative of Johnny Chilembwe anapupuluma emanates from the fact that history has been misrepresented in many facets, because it becomes to a radical historian, it becomes very disheartening to hear somebody that John Chilembwe anapupuluma bwezi azungu atachita zinthu zambiri, yet we are talking of azungu kuchoka ku Malawi 50 years, almost 50 years after the uprising. I mean, one would ask a question, what can be the connection between Chilembwe's 1915 uprising to azungu kuchoka nearly around the 1970s? That becomes, that gives us a gap to say, ndiye kuti ma issues, ma details in between these two events are not clearly presented in history. So it is our duty as historians, as researchers, wherever we are, to pay attention to details and at least give those details that can connect the facts to our propositions. Thank you very much. I think I should stop there.
Many thanks, Mr. Banda, for that input. I then once more call upon any other participant who wants to take the floor before I give shots as we move towards closing. Any other hand that wants to chip in? No. All right. So, Conrad, there was a question that came to you. I think there are two. Take them and also proceed to do your closing remarks in 5 minutes. Then we move to Mr. Douglas Nyirenda in 5 minutes, and then we close. We started at a little bit, a few minutes after 7. It's now getting to 9. We are almost on time to be closing. So, Kamkwara Serenje, respond to the two questions within 5 minutes and also give us your parting shots in conclusion. Over to you, Kamkwara Serenje.
Yeah, the second question was whether Chilembwe had like-minded men who joined his cause. The answer is yes. There were a lot of like-minded men who joined his cause. Although some of his key friends could not join the uprising, but those who understood the cause joined him. That's why we have names of Grey Kufa, Njilima, Kaduya, and others. They understood the cause and joined him, while others who were expected to join, I've also given names of people he persuaded to join, did not join him, probably because maybe he told them that it shall be violent. Maybe he didn't hide that aspect. So he had like-minded people, not only in Chirazulu, some in Cheo, we hear about we hear of Philip Chinyama, some betrayed him, some supported him. So it's the same with what happens even today. Some people understand the cause of something, some people run away from the cause, some betray. It's like that. It's part of human nature. About the that plinth, the statue of Chilembwe, yes, it was there, erected in at Trafalgar Square, that is in the UK, but it was to be there for only 2 years. So it stayed there for 2 years as an honor to Chilembwe, and now it was taken down. It's a square whereby they display people who deserve honor. Now here you can see the irony of what the colonizer can do. The same man they killed in 1915 and ordered that he should be buried in an unmarked grave. They're honoring him after so many years. I don't know what is that, but you can conclude what the view of the colonizer is, and whether an African, a native, could do that to their country. So that is the beauty of history. Facts remain facts in history, and the facts are followed up. So that's what I can say regarding your questions. Let me conclude by thanking my co-presenter, Mr. Douglas Nyirenda, for taking up his time to present such a beautiful presentation. And again, I should also thank the technical expert who makes all this possible, Mr. Arnold Piri, who is a very big enthusiast of history. I also would like to appreciate and thank colleagues from the Lost History Foundation, Dr. Paliani Chinguo, and other colleagues who we work together on these programs. And much appreciation to all you who thought it wise and beneficial to join this Zoom seminar. I believe you have got something from it. We have learned from each other, and let us continue to uphold our true history, because it is our treasure. If we can't do that, we'll be lost, we'll lose our identity, and we'll be exposed to falsehood. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mr. Douglas Nyirenda. Your concluding remarks, over to you. Mr. Douglas Nyirenda, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Douglas, okay.
I'm here.
You have the floor. Concluding remarks, 5 minutes, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Bwana Moderator, for the opportunity to offer concluding remarks. Let me begin by recognizing the insightful presentation made by Comrade Serenge. It was very insightful, very informative, analytical, very critical, rich, and cogent. That's wonderful. Congratulations, Comrade Serenge. And thanks, dear audience, for the important observations and questions. I am going to address these questions, not in any order, but as a matter of combining them in a way, because much of the work has been done by my colleague in responding to these issues. I want to highlight this important point. Was Chilembwe a failure? I say no. One, Chilembwe being exposed, having widely traveled to the Americas, he knew the power of the imperialists. He knew that he could be killed. He knew how powerful these nations were, the forces that were protecting the regimes here. He knew about this thing. What was the significance of his failed uprising there? Let me use that ironic statement. One, Chilembwe articulated the agenda for future activism, for independence, for labor rights, and other for racial equality movements, etc., etc. He articulated the agenda. Though he died, but the agenda which he stood for lived on. And the future movements, they rode on that agenda, including the mass nationalism that started in 1940s. And Selenji has articulated the relationship, how Chilembwe inspired people like Kadali and Lawrence and other nationalists who emerged later. So he articulated the agenda. He inspired the methods of activism. You will notice that after the Chilembwe uprising, there was a break. There wasn't any other armed struggle. It emerged in 1953, briefly, and then 1959, during the emergency. You would imagine the kind of courage that these people had in rebelling against the determined colonial force of the moment. But what was the ground? Who set the ground and the tone? It was Chilembwe. So in terms of articulating the agenda, all the concerns that he wrote on, they remained the same concerns of future generations. And actually, some of these issues continue to be thematic in today's development discourse here and even elsewhere. When you talk of the Black Lives Matter, all these issues of racial inequality, etc., etc., the agenda which Chilembwe wrote on has remained relevant to date. That is why I'm saying Chilembwe should not be looked at as a rebel only, but should be looked at as a social development thought leader. He is a thought leader. Again, we have to appreciate the other important point that I would like to address is the question of monuments. Are they real? I think Selenji has addressed that. They are real. I think you can read the article by Mwailu Saka. He's the one who addressed that issue of monuments. Now, the site where the monument was planted is very crucial. That site was meant for kings. It was originally meant to remember and venerate kings in the British of the British Kingdom. And Chilembwe, for him to be found in that site, explains the reverence. Having negotiated with what they did in 1915, the British somehow recognized that this man, though he didn't become a president of some sort, his vision, his intrinsic motivation rose above or equal to their kings. That's my interpretation as how I process the construction of that monument by Kambalu on Trafalgar Square. I think we can keep on and on discussing Chilembwe's action and his legacy, but I hope key issues have been addressed, and this was just my footnote as a way of trying to add some more information to the issues that have been raised. Drew, you asked a very pertinent question. Wongani, you raised an important question. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I thank the audience for being so lively and raising critical questions that have informed our conversation. The discussion will not end here. I hope it has been recorded. The session has been recorded. We hope you will share the recorded sessions. I am going to share the notes of that, my write-up that I presented. I have taken note of that. I will share with you, Bwana Chinguo, I think today or tomorrow, since I have power issues here, but I will share with you so that I think it can be shared with our general audience. Overall, thank you very much and all the best. Please, thank you for remembering me to present my perspective on this seminar. Looking forward to future engagements. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas Nyirenda, for your parting shots, and also Conleth Kamukwara Selenji for your parting shots. And many thanks to you too for making yourselves available to do the presentations. So as we bring this session to a close, it is important to reflect on the key insights that have emerged from today's discussion. What has become clear is that John Chilembwe's historical significance cannot be confined to January 1915 alone. His legacy extends into education, health, economic empowerment, political organization, labor activism, and the Pan-African thought, as we have learned from our two presenters. The trajectories of individuals such as Daniel Malikebu, Frederick Njilima, and the later nationalists and freedom fighters who invoked Chilembwe's spirit demonstrate that his influence persisted well beyond his lifetime. At the same time, today's discussion reminds us that the history is not a zero-sum exercise. Expanding our understanding on Chilembwe does not negate the contributions of Eliot Kamwana or other early struggle figures. Rather, it challenges us to adopt a more inclusive and layered historical narrative, one that recognizes the multiple actors overlapping the struggles and continuity across generations. This session tonight, therefore, contributes to a broader task, re-examining how we commemorate, teach, and institutionalize memory in Malawi, as Mr. Douglas Nyirenda pointed out. This session invites us to move beyond the symbolic recognition, such as monuments and banknotes, and towards deeper public understanding of the ideas, institutions, and struggles that shaped the nation. On behalf of the Lost History Foundation, I would like to sincerely thank our speakers once again for the insightful presentations and all participants for their engagement and thoughtful contributions. And I hope that this conversation does not end here, but rather informs future research, teaching, and public discourse on Malawi's liberation history. At that juncture, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our session tonight. And before we leave, I invite you to hang around for 5 minutes and watch this short video that we are about to share.
A devastating cultural bomb quietly deployed. Them that the youth deceiving, destroying, teaching them their ancestors' ways are small, their language irrelevant, their roots bound to fall. Culture branded backward, rustic and weak. A lie whispered softly yet taught every week.
A tree without roots can't stand the wind. Shallow roots fall again and again. The older the roots, the deeper they grow. Preserving the past lets the future know. A strong society honors where it came from, restores its culture, keeps history strong. For culture well kept is the backbone we need, the soil where justice, wisdom, and progress are seeded.
When you lose your ground, then you are lost. When roots are forgotten, count the cost. Know your background, reclaim your ground. In history's echo, your truth is found.
Lost history foundation lights the way, helping us remember, reclaim, and stay. Ancient beliefs are fading away. youth chase foreign display.
Our names feel heavy, branded as old.
Our mother tongues traded for accents of gold.
We silence our stories, our rhythms, our sound, while borrowed identities circle around.
Lost history foundation digs deep in the past, preserving our stories, making them last.
Using history as a tool to grow,
building development from roots we know.
lost history foundation revives what was lost.
Cultures and practices erased at a cost. So society learns, remembers, and sees the power of heritage shaping destinies.
Lost history foundation restores what was broken, confronting the bomb by the lies it has spoken,
Resuscitating traditions, beliefs, and art, rebuilding the soul, reuniting the heart.
through research and truth the damage is healed. The cultural bomb slowly disarmed and revealed. Gratitude should go to people behind the formation of LHF, Matumbi,
Selenyeche,
Chingu,
Masti,
Sankofa, bravo people.
may the Almighty Jah give you wisdom.
Yes, wisdom, so abundant to successfully run the organization.
tisaona naso haida pakali pano patengamana tawangasi titokose kwa John Chilembwe yemwe wadata ya moyo wache kale kale lelo tilikoyenda tilinyangwa nyangwa tilipe chifukwa cha iye mene hada ya mbili la kutipenyela dituntendele ndiwufulu maulele ekupempha kwa hambo yekotinziku wake use mundendere haida nyumba kalola haida mwina nkuteka tisaona naso haida bakali pano patengamana tawangasiwanga
John mwamuna wanga azunga kwa John ine ndisalandia John
haida pakali pano patengamana tawa mkazi wanga
John mamuna wanga azunga kupa John ine ndisala ndiya John
haida numba kanola haida mina nkuteka chizaona nazo haida pakali pano patengamana tawa mkazi wanga
John mamuna wanga azunga kupa John ine ndisala ndiya John
yapa maka tiyenela kumvesa chilembwe hadalolela kukesa mwazi chifukwa cha ifetosa Malawi hamuna ndiyakazi why black raiders of Africa shut them bang tribute to the black raider chilembwe me I go rise a peace minister there's nothing you can stop me fi sing this song Rika children smile Rika children jump Konda de wina ndinsake mabare Ona ni chilemwe iya dali muntu wa mpamvu Komano sopano eno Ntawi yoti songe wino Ho follow